My son is trying to fight me for the family jewels from his deceased mother. I tell him he's not getting the ring, it's going to his sister. Oh boy, he has other plans. To say I was mad as hell would be an understatement. I'm 46 years old and I'm a male, and I have a son, Jake, 23 male. Jake was a good kid growing up, so him doing this was a complete shock to me. I have a daughter too, Amber, 16. When my wife passed away from COVID nearly 2 years ago, she already had a will in place. She was immune and compromised due to a prior condition she was diagnosed with a decade before she passed. She made sure she had a will set up just in case anything happened to her. And in said will, she divided her assets between our children. Jake got his cut when he was 21. He used the money to put down a down payment on a condo, and he also got his mother's car. But the will stated that my daughter was to get all my wife's jewelry. That included a vintage gold ring with a diamond that had a slight blue sapphire on each side of it. That ring has been passed down for generations in my wife's family. It was originally her grandmother's wedding band. Her husband was a jeweler and handcrafted the ring for her himself. And it was passed down to my wife's mother when her grandmother died, and then to my wife herself when her mother passed. And it, along with other jewels, was a way to go to my daughter. When my wife passed away, my grief was intense, but I powered through it for the sake of my family. They supported me 100%, so the betrayal from my son was just a rusty knife in the back for me. For the past 8 months, Jake has been dating Sarah. She has my son wrapped around her pretty little finger. And she loves jewelry as she adores herself with it a lot. My son mentioned the family jewels my wife left his sister to Sarah one day, and Sarah really wanted to see them. So Jake went into my room when no one was home and showed them to her. He later admitted to me that he's done this, and I was angry, but I thought that would be the end of it. Oh boy, I was wrong. Jake came to me a week ago and begged me for the ring from his mother's family jewel so that he could propose with it. He said Sarah had fallen in love with the ring when she saw it before, and he just knew it'd be the perfect ring to ask her to marry him with. He seemed completely convinced I'd be jumping for joy for wanting him to propose. But instead, I told him I was not the one to ask. The ring belongs to Amber, and I would not have him pressuring her to give it up either. For a fair chance, I'd allow him to explain his reason and ask her for it once. But only once. Without pressuring her, and if she refuses for any reason, that's the end of it. Jake agreed and asked Amber for the ring right in front of me, but she told him no because she wanted to keep it in the family. And it's always loved that ring. To her, it's considered priceless. She could not bear to ever give it up. I told Jake that was that and to not press the matter further. Jake left looking very unhappy about not getting the ring. But I thought he'd let it go and look into finding a similar one. But he came back another day while I was at work to talk to his sister after she got home from school. He and Amber got into a huge fight, all about the ring, and Amber called me crying. I called Jake and told him to get out of my house and leave his sister alone. Jake yelled at me that he should have just as much right to the ring as his sister, because my wife was his mother too. But I reminded him he got a lot of his mother's money and her car. The jewelry is Amber's and only hers. He hung up on me, and Amber soon texted me that he left very angry. Later, right before I left for work, my daughter called and told me that Jake came back. He walked in dressed in a suit, went into my room and took something, then left without saying anything to Amber. She tried to keep him from leaving, but he shoved her out of the way. I rushed home as soon as my shift was over and checked my wife's jewelry box. The ring was gone. I immediately called Jake, but he did not answer, so I messaged him that I'll get the police involved if he does not return the ring. Using it to propose won't stop me from taking it back. That finally made him talk to me, and he tried to say that I could not do that to him because he's my son. I said I can and I will, because he outright stole the ring, and he'd better bring it back right away or I'd take drastic measures. Well, he called me right after that, and in a whisper, he said that it was too late. He's taken his girlfriend out to dinner and proposed to her with the new ring. He hadn't had it for more than an hour by this point, yet the ring was already on her finger. I said this was his problem. He stole the ring, he can bring it back, if not his, and I will do whatever it takes to make sure it's returned. And if that means going to police, blowing the whole situation up, then so be it. I'll file a report, I'll even get a lawyer. Jake started crying and saying I could not do this to him. I told him tough luck. He stole from both his sister and his dead mother. I would not back down until that ring was returned. Jake would not stop crying and just making excuses. So I told him to have the ring back by morning or I would be moving forward with legal action. Jake is my son, but he still broke the law. I could not overlook what he did. He said he'd be by in the morning to talk and ended the call while crying even more. Well, Jake did show up in the morning and brought his girlfriend with him to try and guilt us. Turns out she not only knew he stole the ring, she wanted to keep it anyways. Because she was completely in love with the ring since she first laid eyes on it. I told her I don't care. She could have a jeweler or make a copy of it or something, but the original does not belong to her. It belongs to my daughter and deceased wife. Jake begged me one more time just to not make her give it back, but I and my daughter stood firm. Return the ring or face police and maybe even a potential lawsuit. Jake's girlfriend pulled the ring off her finger and dropped it in my daughter's hand, called me an evil jerk, then left my house in tears. Jake started screaming at me that I may have just destroyed his relationship. I retorted him that he did this to his own relationship by stealing a ring that did not belong to him. What kind of son steals from his own sister and dead mother? That's beyond terrible. Jake had nothing more to say to me and walked out to follow after his girlfriend. I did not get anyone else involved in the situation, but Jake did. He tried getting support from friends and family, but he got the exact opposite reaction he'd hoped for. They were all mad at him over what he's done. I got many phone calls and messages from people offering me condolences and saying they were not on Jake's side. I tried to do damage control, but now everybody knows. It's been a week now. Jake refused to speak to me. I've sent him detailed pictures of the ring, just in case he wanted a jeweler to replicate it. But making a copy would be very expensive unless he used fake stones. And thus far, there has been no response. I don't know what in the situation is with his girlfriend, if she even is still his girlfriend after what happened. But doesn't matter. I'll still stand by the fact that Jake had to return the ring. I have since had all my wife's jewelry placed in a safety deposit box that I only have access to, and the jewelry will remain there until my daughter's 21. And may even stay there if she wants to keep it safe that way. I know I'm in the right here to reclaim the ring. However, I don't want my son to hate me, and I don't want the family to hate him. If anyone has any advice as to how better mediate this situation without me giving away the ring, or spending a lot of money, I'm all ears. What's up guys, Mr. Reddito here. There's a complete update for this story. If you're not subscribed to the channel, take a second and click that subscribe button, and check out the other channels by Mr. Reddito in the description below. Here is your update for this story. Well, my son's girlfriend Sarah has officially broken up with him. He's devastated and blames me. Some previously pointed out that I gave him too much credit in saying he was a good kid. He used to be, but the person he is now I just don't recognize. Whether he was always like this deep down, or if he just fell for the wrong person and let her change him for the worse, well, that's a mystery to me. It just does not justify what he did. After I forced him and Sarah to return the stolen ring, she apparently spent days crying in bed, then told Jake that she did not want a different ring no matter how much he told her he'd get her another one. She wanted my deceased wife's ring, and she could not imagine possibly having a different one for their engagement now that it's already been on her hand. Even though it was only for an hour and stolen, the last time I met someone who cried that much about being made to return stolen property, well, they were 4 years old. I heard more than one person say they thought Sarah was being a big baby about it. The situation was no secret because Jake spilled the beans looking for support to the whole family and Sarah's friends. As previous readers know, that backfired badly for them. Well, after Jake failed Gambit for support, all the local drama lovers latched onto the situation like barnacles to a boat. And they kept messaging me with more information daily, even though I wasn't asking. So I was being kept in the loop even though Jake and Sarah weren't talking to me. My son had the pictures I sent him so that he could try and replicate the ring, and took them to a jeweler. A jeweler said he could make a similar ring based on the pictures, but he'd want to closely examine the original, and take proper measurements to make an evolution of the stones and metal in order to see what it'd take to make as close of a copy as possible. Jake waited for a while before swallowing his pride to call me again. His girlfriend was finally at least entertaining the idea of making a copy, but she wanted it to be an exact copy down to the smallest details. They called me a couple days after I made my original post and asked me to bring the ring to a jeweler to get a proper quote on the cost in making a duplicate. I agreed to take an extended lunch break and meet the local jeweler. I got the ring from the safety deposit box and guarded it closely. I could see Sarah's eyes light up with greed the moment she saw it again. She reached her hand out and asked to wear it just one more time, then pouted like a child when I told her no. For all I know, she'd take off running the second she had it. The jeweler looked at the ring very closely for a little while and said it was worth more than he thought, and to copy it would cost a lot. The ring was decades old and expertly crafted by my wife's grandfather sometime in the 1940s. The jeweler signed its praise even. The diamond and sapphires were decently large for an engagement ring, and the ring itself, well, did not use a slim gold band, but a pretty thick and heavy one made of what was estimated to be 18-karat gold. But there was more. The stones themselves were set in platinum, and the ring had many ornate floral carvings on it. The stones alone needed to make an identical ring was more than Jake's current budget, and not include antique value. Making a copy of a ring like that with the variety of materials would cost a lot, and time and labor, because every part of it would have to be handcrafted. It was 5 times what Jake had saved. The best he could have done would to be make a down payment and then spend years in debt. Sarah enthusiastically wanted Jake to have the ring made anyways, but the cost was simply too much, so the jeweler suggested they have one made that looks just the same. It did not need to be made of the exact same materials. They could use a center stone that looked just similar to a diamond, and replace the platinum with similar metal. I can't remember the name of it, but it would have reduced costs by a lot. There was also a suggestion of looking for a modern ring that looks similar to the already made, which would be cheaper as well. In fact, the jeweler already had 3 ring sets aside that all look similar with a central diamond and sapphire, and all very reasonably priced. Jake was all for either idea when Sarah suddenly slapped him while calling him a cheap, broke-butt wannabe. Then turned on her heel to me and called me an evil jerk again for taking the original ring back, because it's been given to her when Jake proposed, and should still be hers regardless. Then she held up her hand in the manner one does when they expect you to put a ring on their finger, and outright demanded the ring back while saying it was her right to wear it, and that my daughter would not need it because it'd just go to a waste with her. She actually said it's not like my daughter would be doing the proposing to anyone, since a man could just get a different ring for her someday. Oh boy, did that make me angry. And she's clearly noticed because she took a couple steps back. I looked her dead in the eyes and said that my wife's family ring will never be hers. It wasn't Jake's to give away, and he knew it. That's why he went out of his way to steal it while I wasn't home, because he hoped I would not demand it back if he used it. But neither he nor she had a right to it. Then I said that it's entitled people like her that is wrong with the world now. She acts like whatever she wants she should be handed, and she's lustered over my wife's ring ever since Jake first showed it to her. That whole speech was a bit long-winded with some conjecture, I know, but I couldn't just hold myself back verbally anymore. My wife used to tell me that if I wanted to insult someone, I always figured out exactly what to say. After I said all that to Sarah's face, she aimed to slap me, but I guess the look in my eyes was enough to make her turn away and storm outside instead, while very loudly making some sort of unintelligible tantrum noises that hurt my ears. She even intentionally knocked down a counter display on her way out. Jake was glaring at me with absolute rage, but did not say anything until I asked him why he was with this awful woman. And he just said that he loved her and followed after. To his credit, yeah, she's very beautiful, but it's really just skin deep. Sarah would not talk with Jake for a while, and then a few days later told him that they're through because she felt like he did not value her enough to get her the ring she deserved. That she could not imagine having a Messier like me as a father-in-law. She said she felt thoroughly humiliated by me and cried that people all think she's a gold digger. But I don't think they're wrong. I mean, she slapped my son for just suggesting they make a cheaper version of an expensive ring he could not afford. Then threw a massive tantrum just because I would not hand over the original when she demanded it. That's the behavior of a gold digger if I've ever seen any. And while it's an assumption on my part, exactly how long would Sarah have stayed with my son if someone rich came along and swept her off her feet? Would she have been inclined to still stand by him? Something tells me no. I honestly feel she just wanted the ring and nothing else. Right after the incident with the breakup, Jake did try to get me to the house again while I wasn't home. To do what I have no idea, but if I were to speculate, he may have been there after cash and my gun safe, or thought the family jewels were still in the house. Since, I didn't tell him at that point that I stored them away in a deposit box, and I really did not want to think my own son would break in for either of those reasons. But he stole from me once, he could do it again. Someone here suggested I replace the locks on my house, and I did. So Jake's key would not longer work. I'm looking into getting cameras put in it now too. My daughter Amber called me after Jake showed up and said she was terrified while he was banging on the front door, demanding to be let in. I called his cell phone and he did not answer. But I guess it spooked him because Amber said he left right after his phone started ringing. He has a set ringtone for me, so he knew it was me calling for an instant. Jake called later that evening, but before he could start yelling at me, I demanded to know what the hell he was doing trying to break into my house. Well, I wasn't home earlier. He scared his sister and she nearly called police. Jake dodged the question by being angry about me changing the locks because I don't trust him. I said dang right I don't trust him, not after what he did. Jake fired back that I could not just be happy for him once in his life, and that if his mom was still alive, she would have wanted him to use the ring to propose. I saw red and said that if she wanted that, she would have willed it to him. So he began whining and saying it was all my fault. He explained exactly what Sarah said when she broke up with him and how she called me a Messier, among other things. Then ranted about how I always thought Sarah was never good enough for him. But I pointed out he was putting words in my mouth. I never said she wasn't good enough for him. I barely knew Sarah. And I never once got in the way of him being with her till he stole the ring. He tried to deny that, but I asked him when I'd ever asked anything or said anything bad about Sarah prior to the ring incident. He really sounded like he was thinking hard, but even he could not remember any actual time because I barely saw this woman, ever then, while they were dating. I wasn't even aware they were dating till at least 3 months had gone by in their relationship. But that was all beside the point. What the hell was he trying to get into my house for this time? He refused to answer. So I answered for him. I said if he was after the ring or any other family jewels, they've been moved to a secure, safe location only I have access to. And if he was trying to break into my safe for any emergency cash fund, there's no way he'd get it open. Or if he was there to do any sort of harm to his sister, I'd kick his butt myself. I may have hit this nail in the head with at least one of those things because Jake just had a long silent pause on the phone. Then he told me he's made up his mind to put this into a transfer at his job to sell his condo. He wants to move as far away as possible and never speak to me again. His last words to me were to have a nice life with my favorite child. I don't understand how my son has completely changed on this level in just a year. I never actually called Sarah a manipulative gold digger until recently. I said she had my son wrapped around her finger and she loves jewelry. Though I guess that's not all that different in the long run. But in truth, she is a manipulative gold digger. Especially after the drama act she put on to try to keep a ring that was never hers. I mean, she spent days in bed crying over a ring she knew was stolen. And then had her huge tantrum at not being able to get it back. And now, because of her, my son has chosen to wash his hands of me and his sister altogether. I'm devastated, but at the same time furious that my son would do such things just to appease this witch of a woman he'd only been dating 8 months. That's not enough time dating before proposing. I dated my wife for over 2 years before popping the question. I shudder to think what things would have been like if that witch had married my son. I know Jake's going to blame me for a long time, and I'm not sure if we'll ever speak again. I hope one day we can reconcile, but for now, I think we need time apart. Amber is also very upset. She's extremely thankful I got the ring back for her, but she's just as shocked as I that Jake has become like this now. And she's referring to him as a brute for how he shoved her aside when he stole the ring, and also calling him a simp. Whatever that means. Thankfully, she has a great support system with me and the rest of the family, something I know Jake doesn't have right now. Multiple family members have called or messaged him to tell him off, and his now former best friend even came to me to apologize. He and Jake got into a nasty fight over what he's done, and when his own best friend since elementary school did not see things eye to eye from his side, Jake cut him off. Jake's ex-girlfriend Sarah also got in trouble with her own family. Her parents contacted me to ask for my side of the story, and then apologized for their daughter's behavior. They only knew a small bit of what happened, but were appalled to hear about what she did. Like Jake, they said that she used to be a much kinder person. In the past few years, she's changed so much. They're severely disappointed in her, and they were also covering half of the rent to her current apartment, and are now telling her that when the lease is over, they will not be renewing it with her. She can either pay the full rent herself, or look for somewhere else to live, and now she's going around cursing my name and saying it's all my fault. What is it with people these days? It's like ever since all these memes about entitled people on the internet exploded, it just made more people like them. When I was Jake's age, I only saw people like that on rare occasion. Now, they're everywhere. I've seen 2 in the local supermarket this year even, and they're spreading their toxicity like a flood on the world. I can only hope one day my son comes to his senses and finds happiness again. Whether or not he chooses to speak with me ever again, I'll hold out hope he'll one day return to being the kind person he once was. Alright guys, that was a crazy one. Let me run by a couple of these comments through you guys and see if you agree with them or not. These commenters, talking about the commenters on the original post, who talk about OP spending the money to make a replica himself, they're out of their mind. Why enablers have to enable is beyond me. People just need to stop. So this commenter is basically saying, all these comments that are saying, OP, you should pay for the replica ring. Why? That's just enabling his son who made horrible decisions. Comment 2 says this and it's replying to that. Right? Any possibility that he would have done that, and he definitely wasn't obligated to, was gone with her tantrums. I like OP's mature attitude and the way he doesn't suffer fools. Yeah, so guys, let me know in your opinion, do you think OP should have bought the replica ring for his son even though all the tantrums, nightmares, banging on the door, stealing, everything that he did? Should you buy the ring? Drop your comments for that, guys. That's all the stories I have for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have an amazing day. Mr. Reddito's here daily. You can find me on 3 different channels. The links for those are in the description below. Have a wonderful day.